many a state is still tainted by the activities of the executioners it employs. The cold exercise of cruelty that it not only tolerates, but actively mandates. Where this depravity has been abolished, there always remain some who pray for a return to the gallows, who beg societal evolution to reverse itself. The death penalty is still a popular subject of debate. In a society that is eager to shelve moral questions and ethical introspection as taboo, this is revealing. Such discussion is only considered respectable if both sides of it are regarded as such. Debate and discussion should never be predicated on the degree to which each side is respectable. The proponents of the death penalty are utterly contemptible. Rational minds will engage them in debate anyway. Morally reprehensible idiocy is not an excuse for evading debate. Morally reprehensible idiocy does not put one beneath rational consideration. Morally reprehensible idiocy puts one right in the crosshairs of rational consideration, right in line for philosophic annihilation. The death penalty, capital punishment, is a grotesque perversion of justice that must be eradicated from the face of the earth. It is a morally reprehensible and irrationally detestable idiocy of the highest caliber. The opponents of the death penalty often invoke practical arguments. They cite the cost and the innocent slaughtered. The death penalty is both expensive and a taker of innocent lives. These practical arguments are useful supporting points for those who argue for the abolition of this grotesque practice. Here, however, I wish to attack the death penalty on less practical and more philosophical grounds. Even if the death penalty was cheap and guaranteed to only slaughter the guilty, I would oppose it anyway, and you should too. The hideousness of the death penalty goes beyond its serious practical flaws. The first of the more philosophical objections to the death penalty concerns the power of the state. The argument is simple. The death penalty represents an overreach of state power. The state should not have the power to slaughter people who are of no threat to anyone. The state should not have the power to slaughter criminals who have already been confined and neutralized. The state should not be given that amount of power over life and death. Utterly unnecessary killing represents a disgusting excess of state power. This argument is another valuable side point. It is not, however, my central attack on the disgrace that is the death penalty. Far more important is rational morality. A form of morality defined by a thoughtful consideration of and logical progression from the basis of reason. The basis of reason is of course pain and pleasure, the forces that give everything else its meaning, the forces that define the sentient experience, that govern the sentient reality. The foundation of rational morality is consideration of one's capacity for suffering. Following from such consideration, what is irrational if not the undermining of respect for sentience? Following from such consideration, what is irrational if not the corrosion of empathy and compassion? Following from such consideration, what is irrational if not the normalization of cruelty and brutality? To undermine respect for sentience, corrode empathy and compassion, normalize cruelty and brutality, this is irrationality embodied. One who can suffer has no business doing such things. The cultivation of compassion, propagation of empathy, and promotion of respect for sentience are far more logical pursuits for one who can suffer. These rational realities provide a framework for rational moralizing. They must be reflected in the behavior of the rational actor. They represent the realization of self-interest, through moralizing. It is for these reasons that much that is criminal is immoral. It is for these reasons that the death penalty is immoral. The death penalty is immoral for the exact same reason that so much crime is. A humane society is in the interest of one who can suffer. The death penalty is a blatant affront to such a society. It is a rejection of the compassion that lies at the core of such a society. It is antithetical to rational morality. By extension, it is the enemy of the rational actor. The death penalty is a moral crime not merely against the executed. The death penalty is a moral crime against everyone. To undermine respect for sentience, to corrode empathy and compassion, to normalize cruelty and brutality. This is an attack on the self-interest of all who can suffer. Such things represent a wrong against all. Everyone is the victim. The death penalty legitimizes the idea that cruelty and violence are an appropriate response to a wrong. The death penalty encourages the desire for violent revenge. The death penalty encourages sadism. The death penalty is an endorsement of the bloodthirsty animalistic side of humanity. It is the very thing it pretends to reject. It is animalistic savagery, pure and refined. The state is the ultimate normalizing and legitimizing force. The state has a greater capacity to undermine respect for sentience, corrode empathy and compassion, and to normalize cruelty and brutality than any individual. In this regard, the death penalty is even more rationally detestable than much of the crime that it claims to punish. This punishment is in truth nothing but a replication that increases the scale of the immorality. The justice system must have a rational basis, not an emotional one. Only a fool would deny that the death penalty is an emotional institution first and foremost, as is all retribution. This reality is demonstrated by the fact that the desire for retribution is always the most intense when one first hears of the crime. The retributive desire only fades with time. To fade with time in such a way is not a characteristic of rationality. It is a characteristic of emotion. It is emotional impulse that fades with time. The desire for violent retribution is one such impulse. The advocates of the death penalty have one argument that they favour before all others. That argument is the invoking of the most dreadful crimes. The invoking of such crimes is often used as an argument. This argument is devoid of reason. It is an appeal to emotion in the purest sense. Occasionally the supporters of this inhumanity will attempt to construct a rational argument. These arguments are consistently of the low quality that always indicates that the argument is nothing but a facade, intended to give the appearance of intellectual respectability to emotional idiocy. The excessive employment of the emotional appeal is all the evidence one needs to understand that the death penalty is an idea founded on emotion. Retributive violence is in many regards the most emotionally desirable, yet rationally detestable thing in the world. A tragedy that so many allow emotion to overcome reason. Only an idiot would deny the emotional appeal of the death penalty. Yet it is such pure emotional appeal that also backs so much crime. Who would we be to claim ourselves superior to the criminal when we act on the same mindless emotional impulses that he did? Most ironically, the death penalty is founded on the same emotional desire for violent retribution that so much crime is. We condemn criminals who assault and murder over perceived wrongs, and then we do the very same thing. The only difference is that we have perceived legitimacy and structured processes, but in essence the death penalty is so very similar to so much that is criminal. The same emotional desire for violent revenge that the death penalty is founded on motivates much of the crime that it punishes. By what right do we carry out violent retribution on a man as punishment for his own enactment of violent retribution? Where is the justice in the replication of the crime? We must reject destructive emotional urges in favour of reason. The state must operate on reason and reason alone. Emotion should play no role in the affairs of the state. Vengeful emotions are understandable. They should, however, have no place in the functions of the state. Every time I hear of a horrible crime, I feel a desire to see the offender suffer. That reprehensible emotional desire should have no place in the justice system. Justice must be the realm of reason, and reason alone. Only reason can deliver order, and the rationally desirable. Emotion leads to chaos and cruelty. Just because I would do it, doesn't mean the state should do it. In this fundamental maxim we see the essential separation. The separation between the emotional impulse of the individual and the rational processes of the state. The state must be a solution to the animalistic side of humanity, not the ultimate expression of it. The death penalty turns the state into the bloodthirsty sadistic beast that it was supposed to restrain. The death penalty is a cancer. It must be destroyed. The defenders of this inhumanity face a horde of philosophically devastating arguments. Their only defense consists of the desperate emotional appeal that is their constant usage of horrible crimes. Their shameless weaponization of grotesque immorality in an effort to justify more grotesque immorality. The morally depraved love nothing more than exploiting depravity in an attempt at justifying depravity. The supporters of the death penalty will use sadism to fuel sadism, cruelty to fuel cruelty, depravity to fuel depravity. They are more interested in replicating the crime than addressing it. The death penalty is a monstrous practice. We must see to it that it is utterly eradicated.